again, I come back to balance. We need balance. We have to balance our tourism and livability. Us being a place of destination where people come and turn around and leave versus livability, okay? And when we focus and shift our focus a little bit on livability, you'd be amazed at what it does to your economy. Your home prices and value go up. You become a healthier community. You and your families become happier. You live longer. Put an economic price on that. I do not think we can, and those are very important things. Another thing I think is very important, and we've witnessed some of our neighborhoods be under attack of incompatible development and redevelopment, right? We can look down at the beach and see Clearwater Point and the hotel building. We can peek at Skycrest community and a storage facility being put in. We can look at Edgewater Drive and the community fighting over a tall building being put in right in front of their neighborhood that's incompatible. Those things do not work in some of our neighborhoods, and we need to find ways to preserve, protect, and promote our quality of life. We should also continue to consider overlay districts to protect some of these neighborhoods where incompatible development cannot develop. We should continue to require new development to landscape properly and include their setbacks so that we're not invading the quality of life in our neighborhoods. I vow to preserve, protect, and promote the quality of life in your community.
Okay, we're going to take a question now from the audience, and I believe, Bud, you're next. What are the 3 most important issues facing Clearwater, and how would you handle or address each one of them?
Well, as I go door to door, one of the questions that I hear often is if I have to go down to the beach, or if I have to go downtown to Clearwater for an event, where do I park? People in church don't talk about what we've had during the sermon. They talk to me about parking in downtown Clearwater because there is no facility to accept large groups of people at the same time. So do we have a system? Are we looking at long-term in terms of finding ways to accommodate all the people that want to come down to downtown when there is an event? The other issue that I would like to address, and I'm going to talk about 2 issues, not 3, is the fact that when I'm talking with developers and people who want to come into Clearwater, who are thinking about Clearwater, I'm talking about restaurateurs. And I've been talking to some of the leading restaurants and the owners of those restaurants in Tampa as to why they haven't come into Clearwater. And in spite of what the city has said for year after year after year, they suggest that Clearwater is not a friendly town in terms of building and business. So my suggestion is we need to inculcate the idea that we are welcoming business, that we want to encourage business, that we're not going to put barriers in front of their opportunity to come down and make a difference and to bring a different quality of life to our citizens. So those are 2 out of 3 that I would like to talk about. Thanks.
When I ran for office 4 years ago, it was interesting. There was only one fellow I was opposing, the incumbent. But the campaign speeches that I'm hearing from the candidates this time are almost the same as mine 4 years ago. And one of those main things was the neighborhoods feel that the city is not listening to them. How many would agree with that? And that was the same 4 years ago. I have made a conscious effort to be in the neighborhoods, to visit the neighborhoods. In the last 4 years, I've had 30 visits at the 5 neighborhood libraries. And I've been to many, you folks know, I've been to many of your neighborhood association meetings and have really enjoyed it. And I've tried my best as a council member to let you know that we are concerned about what you need, what you want to say. So that is one issue. And I do think, another thing I ran on 4 years ago was transportation. And it wasn't just more buses, but it was new transportation. And like elevated personal rapid transportation. We have in the Bank of America building a fellow by the name of Tom Nocera, who is hoping to have Beach Trend, which is an elevated personal rapid transit that is solar powered, green, and fast as lightning, and small individual cars. And I think that, he thinks that will take a third of the cars off the road, so our roads then would be safer. And so those are two of the three things that, that are on my heart and mind. Thank you.
I'm making a point to, I've made a point throughout the campaign so far to listen very carefully to neighborhoods and the people that live in them, because at the end of the day, I would say my number one priority for the city is for us to aspire as a city to not just have the best beach in America, but the best city in America. And that can't happen unless every street, every neighborhood, every person in our city is valued and important and is part of the conversation of how we become together a great city. So I've been engaging a lot of folks who live in neighborhoods who tell me that they've never talked to anybody that's been an elected official before, and often they haven't talked to a candidate for elected office before, to hear what their concerns are. And they have concerns, they have some issues that are in the paper they want to talk about, but most of them come down to the four core values or core things that local government should provide. Water, where we get our water. Tampa Bay Aquifer has been in the paper, and that's, you know, the water is a concern for our community going forward. Streets and roads, traffic congestion that spills over from main arteries, cut-throughs through their property. It, you know, challenges the safety for the kids running their neighborhoods. Public safety. We have an older population in our community. They need a fire department, police department that can respond quickly to their needs. Needs to have the most updated equipment and current equipment, and sewer. We have an aging sewer system, which we're gradually updating, but it's aging and could collapse at any time. And if our neighborhoods are flooded with water, we're not going to be a successful city. So those core services are the things that touch all of our neighborhoods, all of our citizens, all of our voters, and I think those are the most important priorities for the city going forward.
Are we having fun yet? Smile, come on. We're here for you guys. Another good question. Being born and raised in the city of Clearwater has allowed me a unique perspective to see Clearwater, its growth, its development, its rich history, and the path we've taken to get here today. Completing a master's degree in public administration has gifted me the knowledge of local governance, of policy formation, the urgency of inclusion, and the vital importance of trust, integrity, and listening. I think we've gotten away in our community a bit from listening to the residents. Suzanne and I, my wife, we've walked around and knocked on thousands of doors in this community, and there's all too many times, the beach, for example, the beach is being developed and almost overdeveloped. We're pushing our neighborhoods to the north and to the south, further and further, where they almost have nowhere to go but in the water, right? There's negative externalities that come with development and building, and we have to make sure that we're properly planning for those negative externalities like parking and congestion and trash and recycling and crime, right? We go to Countryside and knock on doors, and Countryside is a wonderful community. It's now the most densely populated area of our city. Countryside just had their end of the year breakfast. Not one elected official was able to make it that was invited, right? They're a little saddened by that. This new world we live in of public service, you can no longer sit in a downtown building or a city hall and hope that the voices come find you. You have to get out in your community, roll your sleeves up, and find those voices and what the needs are of your community. Number two, we need to be a business-friendly and an efficient climate here in Clearwater. It's been said. We need to change our culture in the city. It can no longer be a client customer approach. It needs to shift to a citizen's approach. And the last thing, we need to be accountable and translucent in our financial attractions in this city, because I'm sad to read in the paper all too often of thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars missing.
So my three are basically what I document every time I go knock on doors and when I'm at the bar lounge and I hear. So these are not specifically mine, but this is what I hear. We are the city of no. People don't feel that this is a city that they can prosper. So that's very consistent every time I knock on doors. Second, disconnect. The neighborhoods are disconnected and they don't feel connected to the city government. That is also very, very consistent. And I have a great example. I had one night off finally, went out, and I'm talking to people, and I'm with a great group of strangers, and we all start talking. And one asks, where are you from? St. Pete. Where are you from? Safety Harbor. Where are you from? Dunedin. And the couple next to me answer, countryside. The only people that did not answer their city, but rather their neighborhood. And that means something. It means they don't identify themselves as citizens of Clearwater. So that has to be addressed. And last, well not last, last to speak of, is the conflict between the Church of Scientology and the rest of the city. It has to be addressed. It is a hot topic, and whenever it dies down, Tracy gives us a new article. So, you know, they keep calling it the elephant in the room. In my life, it's not the elephant in the room. It's a bunch of birds chirping in my tree, in my ear. So it needs to be addressed. We need to resolve this conflict. We need to represent all and be inclusive. And I recognize that we have to honor the needs of the majority and not the select few.
Okay, Dr. Bob, we'll start with you. And what projects does Clearwater's Economic Opportunity Zone need, and how will you help attract investments into that area?
I'm so glad you asked this question. Anybody here actually know what an opportunity zone is?
No.
Some of you do, I know. Opportunity zones are very limited in scope. We do have one here in Clearwater that overlays a part of the CRA, which is the downtown Clearwater. It's a little fatter and not quite as wide, unlike me. But an opportunity zone, it started in 2017, federal tax cuts. The language and the rules for it actually came out about 2 weeks ago. And so are there any experts who know all the rules? Not yet. There are some. But it deals largely with federal capital gains tax liability. And people who have and make a lot of money can invest in these opportunity zones. And there are two big benefits of it. One is a huge tax break for those people who have earned a lot of capital gain income. And then also, this money will be used to invest in needy areas, in housing and businesses. And we in Clearwater need that. And so it helps the economically depressed areas of a community. The question was, what resources and experience do you have available? Well, me personally, I don't have any funds. Capital gains tax for me. But I would send prospects to Denise Sanderson in our office, and she is the resident city expert, and she would send you down to the Ring and Edmund Rakipi, who has an office there. See him.
Well, what I would say is, our experience with our company, Sports Facilities Advisory and Sports Facilities Management, is that the projects we see in opportunity zones and development zones around the country are those projects that make sense for that community. That the biggest mistake a community can make is to go to another city in Florida and say, wow, that's been really successful there. We'll duplicate exactly what worked in St. Augustine. And what we find in our work is it hardly ever works for another facility exactly the way it does it somewhere else. What you have to do is you find that the right solution for your community. So what is that for Clearwater? We were going to do it, advise a client that had the money through an opportunity zone to invest. We would do a feasibility study to see what kinds of things would work, where the market would come from to frequent that establishment and enterprise. And so that's what we need to do here. We need to find interested investors who want to invest in our opportunity zone, and then help them evaluate whether or not there's a business model, a competent business model for that to be successful here. What we do in that zone needs to be tailored and carefully customized and constructed for what will make Clearwater successful and work in our zone. What that is, we don't have, if I were to go to shop on Clearwater Beach, I go to International Mall in Tampa for a certain level of stores. We don't have that availability of a certain level of shopping here in Clearwater, that we have to go sometimes outside the county to find the type of store that might work here. But whatever we do in that zone needs to be smart and needs to be customized and crafted to work in Clearwater.
I don't want to reiterate too much what our friend said, but there are some things that, you okay over there? There are some things that I can add to it. It's important to know that while we are discussing about an opportunity zone in downtown, the city of Clearwater and Pinellas County identified 3 opportunity zones in your city of Clearwater. Number 1 being downtown, number 2 being the MLK district, and number 3 being the industrial area of Hercules Avenue. What happens is the county then submits them to the state, and Governor DeSantis then decides what zones become labeled that. And he chose a distressed area of downtown, as he labeled it, as your economic opportunity zone. So that's how we have that district. It is important to understand that although it sounds great and we all want to run to the bank and this is a great investment opportunity, it is a challenge because, like they said, it has to be capital gains, number 1. Number 2, you have to double down, meaning if you put $1 million invested into this property, you have to be willing to put $1 million back on top of it and redeveloping it. So it gets expensive and it's hard for developers to do that. One of the biggest things economic planning runs into is they field calls all day long from Billy and Tina that want to open up a hair salon or sell dresses in the zone because it sounds like a great benefit. That doesn't work for them. It has to, again, come from capital gain. So the education, we need to make sure we're educating the citizens, we're educating those investors as we're reaching out. The next thing we need to do is make sure that we are empowering the economic planning department to work hand in hand with investors to reach out and diversify that downtown area. And whether it's for businesses, affordable housing, restaurants, and you name it, there has to be a process of educating them, making sure it fits into the plan so that we can move forward. Thank you.
Okay, so being dead last, everybody's covered a lot of stuff. So I think the only thing missing is, one of the great things about this opportunity zone thing is that it's a 10-year plan, which means that these investors don't come, flip, and leave. So there's at least an investment of time. So I just wanted to add that. In terms of educating, Edmund Rakipi, Mr. Cundiff, is actually one of my friends, and he's part of my team. And the reason I chose him is because he's a resource. This is something that I am not well versed in, but this is an opportunity that we cannot ignore, and it has a very strict time frame. So Edmund has spent a lot of time trying to explain it to me, and I almost got it, but we have worked very closely in educating the investors. We've had 2 seminars where we invited investors, not only from Pinellas County, but the surrounding areas, because this is a very time-sensitive opportunity, and we need to educate and get all these investors. And we're trying to get these investors to develop the housing I was talking about earlier, and all the other projects, have these investors be the ones that do the development. So what I plan to do is actually to continue what I've done, which is educating and actually going out and getting those investors and not sitting and waiting for them to knock on my door. Thank you.
You probably know more about the economic development than most people do in just a few short minutes. So I'm not going to go over the same details, but I would like to say that we need to encourage the economic development department in the city of Clearwater to have the sufficient resources to educate the private sector as to why they should be investing in Clearwater. And more importantly, we need to go, in my view, to the homegrown entrepreneurs. We need to go to Frenchie. We need to go to Dan Shovel. We need to go to the people who are developing I think it's a black brick. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Downtown? We need to emulate those people and encourage others who have entrepreneurial spirits to come downtown to learn about the economic development, to talk about and to learn about the tax advantages that they have over that 10-year period to make a difference. So that's what we need to do.
Okay, I got a note saying we're going to take a 5-minute break, unless you don't want to.
Show of hands.
Who wants to take a break? All right, we're moving on then.
Nobody's going to admit it.
We'll start with you, Bruce. And the question is, what benefits will the average Clearwater resident obtain from a $79 million investment in Spectrum Field and a $30 million investment in the Coachman Park Amphitheater?
Well, that's a good question. A good question that I've asked, because every dollar we spend in each one of those projects needs to show value and return on the investment for the taxpayers. So with each project, I'm concerned that it be the city's interests are represented, and by city I mean the taxpayers, the citizens' interest. So on each project, we also need to know collectively that we're never going to sacrifice as a community those four things that are important, as I said in an earlier answer, to every citizen of the community: water, sewer, streets and roads, and public safety. That I'm for both of those projects to the extent that they are wise investments, that they are spent, we can afford them, and that because they do generate economic activity for our community. The Phillies have a long history in the community. Coachman Park is valuable waterfront public property that I believe we should develop, but for the benefit of all citizens in our community, not just one area of town, not any one particular group, for everybody, for use by everybody in the community. And whatever we do with each one of those projects has to be affordable and has to make sense. Every dollar spent on both of those projects needs to be wisely spent. Through the work we do with sports facilities, I can tell you that there's often a back and forth between the city that hosts the spring training site and the Major League Baseball team, and we need to make sure we've got the same strong bargaining that other communities that have spring training and Major League Baseball teams do before we agree to fund that project.
This is probably Mr. Ditro's favorite question of the night because it has the word Philadelphia Phillies included in it. So regardless of what's said after that, I think it's important to identify that the Clearwater Phillies and Spectrum Field are an important community asset in our community. Our Phillies came to this community in 1947, and since then, thousands of ball players, coaches, and spring training fans have enjoyed spring training and then called Clearwater home because of it. I think it's been reported, though I'm sure it's debatable, the Phillies bring an economic impact of $125 million a year to our community, and that's a very, very large number. Having said that, I think it's vitally important that the Phillies pay for their share of what they're asking for. I think the figure you identified was $69 million. I think it's important to say that $40 million of that is coming from county in a tourist development tax, and that's not all from the city. I think it's important as city officials, we lean heavily on the county officials and to make sure that they understand the importance of the Phillies, not just in our city, but in the region and the impact that they make. It is important as we talk about the cost that we're not mortgaging our children's future for something that's far too expensive. So there is an ask and there's a figure on the table. I don't think that line is set in stone, and that's the beginning of a negotiation that has to take place. As far as the park, I think it's just important to know that 17% of the voters in November voted on this referendum. 75% of them voted in favor of reinvesting in the park and redoing it. So something has to be done, but we need to ensure that what's being done is in the plans and the scope of what the voters voted on in that November, and not flip-flop that plan around on them to something bigger. So I think it's important that we find balance, and that whatever we end up doing is in the best interest of all our citizens in this community as taxpayers and our city as a whole.
I wish I had 4 minutes to answer this question, but I'm glad I'm second to last because a lot of it has been covered. So yes to both, because like I said, we need to diversify our revenue, and I think that this will be very important in getting our tax revenue. So let's start off with the amphitheater. Like I said, we're always perceived as last compared to our neighboring cities. And we have to learn from our cities that have been successful. And what have we learned? That whenever they have a destination, you need 3 components. You need recreation, lodging, and food and beverage. The amphitheater is going to be the recreation. So we've got at least that down. And we have a waterfront that's second to none in Florida. I truly believe that. I mean, how many waterfronts do you know have a bluff? And to just leave it simply, just as it is, well, first of all, the vote said no. So we need to move on. But that doesn't mean we're just gonna spend like crazy. We're going to be very, hopefully, fiscally responsible. So the amphitheater is going to be a catalyst and a revenue source. Let's move on to Spectrum Field. I'm not going to repeat everything that everybody else said. So I have had some conversations with various staff in the Phillies, and I was trying to get my head around the whole dorm thing, because I don't feel it's the city's responsibility to pay for it. But they at least explained to me why. They have a group of kids that they get every year, minors, that are now living in motels, and the supervision is not there. So as a mother, I understand that these 16, 17-year-olds should be in a controlled, safe setting. But again, I don't think that is the city's responsibility. But they are part of our city, and they are a valuable part of our city, and they bring a lot to our city. We just need to renegotiate a little bit.
Well, I really will be repetitious. As it was said, 75% of the people voted for the park, to make a difference in the park so that it would be a destination for people from all over the country, let alone Clearwater, to attend. But we have to make sure, as was said a moment ago, that we're not mortgaging our kids' future in terms of the expenses that's going to be required to maintain that park over a number of years. But I am fully in support of the concept of developing that park so that people can come from wherever they come from, around the world or around the country, to experience a unique park that is the destination for an awful lot of people in the city of Clearwater. Spectrum Field, great asset. As it was said, the Phillies have been partners of us since 1947. We're about to renew that agreement, which will be another 10 years. So we're going close to 90 years as a partnership with the Phillies. You may not know, but the revenue that comes from the Phillies is second only to tourism. Most of us didn't know that. So we need to keep the Phillies in place. We need to make sure that The county understands the importance of the Phillies, and we have to make sure that they understand that we're going to do our part. They have to do their part. Thanks.
Having grown up north of Philadelphia, when I came here in 1996, it was almost like coming home, and it is home now, because of the Phillies. And the implication of the question is that the city taxpayers are going to have to foot $79 million, which is just not true. Number one, we don't know what the final cost will be, and I'll explain that in a second. It won't be more than 79, and if there are any cost overrides, the Phillies have agreed and will agree to pay for any cost overrides. There are at least three sources of funding: the state, four, I guess, the state, county, the city, and the Phillies. The city has never, on its price tag, has never offered more than $15 million of city money. And you spread that over 20 years, it's less than $1 million a year. This year, for the Phillies and Clearwater, the county has changed its way of dealing with computing for the first time in 75 years, and we don't know yet what the county is going to provide, and that is what we're all waiting for. But whatever investment, that field belongs to the city of Clearwater, and the Phillies could go away, it would still be our property. Let me quick jump to the other half of the question. The Coachman Park Amphitheater does not cost $30 million. Price tag on that is probably about $14 or $15 million. The $30 million is a bond issue that the city can borrow against to complete the 22 acres. The sources will come from Penny 3 money, Penny 4 money, maybe TDC funds, and the bond issues, and a few other sources I'll be glad to talk with you about.
Okay, we're going to do another question from the audience, and we're back up to you, Michael. In the past, the city has hired consultants, ignored the recommendations, and hired yet another group of consultants to review the same task. What will you do to ensure good project management?
Sorry, I'm not a speed writer. I wanted to make sure I got the question down. Real quick, Mr. Littleson, you're doing an amazing job as our shot clock keeper, so
Of course,
please
thank you.
continue.
Thank you for all being quiet.
Yeah, this is another one when Suzanne and I walk around and knock on doors, is listening to the citizens. It's, why are we paying multiple consultants to review the same thing that a consultant just told us, that a consultant before that told us, and then you look at a price tag of it of $250,000 and $100,000 plus dollars, and it's silly. And I get that we want to continue to evaluate, but sometimes we've all heard the term analysis by paralysis, right? And I think that's where we start to become, and where we go is we start to stingray shuffle through some of these projects because we're tiptoeing so carefully and we don't want to upset the community.